Far below the surface of the Atlantic, where sunlight disappears and pressure becomes crushing, a sperm whale sends a burst of clicks into the darkness. Some clicks help it navigate and hunt, but others are exchanged with members of its family. To us, they may sound like random tapping, a few sharp clicks followed by silence and then another pattern. But the timing is not random. The pauses change, the rhythm shifts. Sometimes another whale responds with a similar pattern. Scientists have spent decades recording these exchanges. Now, artificial intelligence is helping them search for structures that human ears could easily miss. The question is no longer whether the clicks contain information. The question is whether we can ever understand what that information means.
Sperm whales are not simply enormous animals wandering alone through an empty ocean. Female sperm whales and their young live in close social units. They travel together, protect calves, maintain long-term relationships, and cooperate in ways researchers are still trying to understand. Several social units can belong to a larger vocal clan. Members of the same clan use similar click patterns, even when they are not closely related. These patterns are learned socially rather than inherited through DNA. In other words, different whale communities appear to develop their own vocal traditions. You can think of them as something loosely similar to dialects, but extending across social groups that may include hundreds of whales. That matters because it suggests these clicks are connected to culture, identity, and social relationships. To begin understanding them, however, scientists first have to separate communication from the many other sounds sperm whales produce.
Sperm whales spend much of their lives in a world where vision is limited. Sound allows them to function in places where light cannot. During deep hunting dives, they produce powerful echolocation clicks. Those clicks travel through the water, strike an object, and return as echoes. By listening to those echoes, a whale can locate prey and understand its surroundings. But social communication sounds different. When sperm whales interact with one another, they often produce short sequences known as codas. A coda may contain only a handful of clicks and last less than 2 seconds. What distinguishes one coda from another is often the spacing between those clicks. One pattern might sound evenly paced. Another might pause before its final click. Another may become faster or slower depending on the surrounding exchange. The information may not be contained in each individual click. It may be carried by timing, rhythm, variation, and conversational context. And that creates an extraordinary translation problem. When archaeologists try to understand an ancient human language, they sometimes find the same message written in 2 languages, one known and one unknown. That creates a bridge between them. With sperm whales, there is no such bridge. There is no whale dictionary, no written record, and no bilingual speaker who can tell us whether a particular coda means danger, identity, movement, or something humans have no word for. Even if 2 whales produce the same pattern, its meaning might depend on who produced it, who was listening, what happened before it, and what the whales did afterward. A recording by itself is therefore not enough. Researchers need to know which whale was speaking. They need to observe the surrounding animals, track movement and depth, and document whether the whales were diving, resting, traveling, or caring for a calf. Only then can they begin connecting sound with context. And gathering that information requires an entirely new kind of underwater observatory. That is the challenge being taken on by Project CETI, the Cetacean Translation Initiative. The project is working with sperm whale families around the island nation of Dominica in the Eastern Caribbean. Instead of relying on a single microphone, researchers are building a system that can observe multiple parts of a whale's life at once. Underwater hydrophones record clicks traveling through the ocean. Small recording devices attached with suction cups can collect audio, depth, acceleration, and movement data from individual whales. Drones observe behavior from above without placing people directly beside the animals. Autonomous underwater gliders can follow acoustic signals and continue listening over much larger areas. Together, these instruments produce far more than sound. They create a synchronized record of who was present, where the whales moved, how their bodies responded, and what sounds occurred during those moments. But this creates another problem. The amount of data quickly becomes too large and too complicated for people to examine manually. That is where artificial intelligence enters the process.
AI is not sitting underwater and holding a conversation with a whale. Its first job is much less dramatic, but absolutely essential. Ocean recordings are filled with overlapping sounds. There may be waves, engines, echoes, echolocation clicks, and several whales producing codas at nearly the same time. Machine learning systems can search those recordings and identify signals that resemble sperm whale codas. They can measure the tiny intervals between clicks, group similar patterns, and help distinguish communication clicks from the sounds used for hunting. Researchers have also developed an automatic coda detector and annotator, capable of working with noisy recordings and separating codas produced by different whales. That changes the scale of the research. Instead of manually marking every click in thousands of hours of audio, scientists can use automated systems to organize potential conversations for closer examination. The algorithms then compare timing, repetition, and variation across many exchanges. They are not discovering English words hidden inside the recordings. They are mapping the architecture of the communication system. And when researchers examined that architecture closely, they discovered something far more complex than expected.
In a major study published in 2024, researchers examined 8,719 codas recorded from sperm whales belonging to an Eastern Caribbean vocal clan. Earlier classifications had placed these sounds into 21 main coda types. But when researchers analyzed how codas changed during real exchanges, that simple list was no longer enough. They identified 4 important features. The first was rhythm, the pattern created by the spacing between clicks. The second was tempo, the overall speed of the coda. The third was rubato, a subtle stretching or compressing of timing that whales could imitate during an exchange. And the fourth was ornamentation, an additional click placed at the end of an otherwise familiar pattern. These features could be combined in different ways, creating a much larger collection of distinguishable codas. Researchers describe this system as something like a sperm whale phonetic alphabet. That does not mean each feature is a letter or that codas form sentences exactly like ours, but it does show that the whales can systematically modify their signals. For the first time, scientists could see some of the building blocks. They still did not know what most of those blocks meant. This is where many headlines move faster than the science. Finding a structure inside whale communication is not the same as translating it. Imagine hearing a conversation in a language you have never encountered. After listening for long enough, you might recognize repeated sounds. You might notice when one person asks a question, when another interrupts, or when speakers copy each other's rhythm. You would have discovered patterns, but you still would not know what they were discussing. AI faces the same limitation. A model can identify that one coda differs from another. It can detect that timing changes with conversational context. It may even find that certain whales use particular patterns more often. But a statistical relationship is not automatically a meaning. To move closer to interpretation, researchers must repeatedly connect specific sounds with specific behaviors. They must test whether the connection appears across individuals and different situations. Eventually, carefully designed playback studies may help determine whether whales respond to a signal in the way researchers predict. Until that happens, the safest conclusion is also the most accurate one. AI is learning how sperm whale communication is constructed before scientists know what most of it is saying.
So what might be hidden inside these exchanges? Some codas are known to contain information related to identity. Particular patterns can be associated with individuals, social units, or larger vocal clans. Beyond that, researchers are investigating many possibilities. Clicks might help whales maintain social bonds, coordinate movement, care for young,
or recognize members of their community. But those possibilities should not be confused with confirmed translations. We cannot currently take a coda and confidently write a sentence beneath it. The real communication system may also organize information in ways very different from human language. Sperm whales live in a three-dimensional acoustic world. They can dive more than a kilometer below the surface, remain separated across large distances, and perceive sound with abilities very different from ours. Their communication evolved for their bodies, their environment, and their society. Understanding it may therefore require more than attaching human words to whale sounds. It may require learning how another intelligent species experiences the world. And that possibility makes the limitations of the research even more important. Even an enormous dataset cannot remove every uncertainty. Researchers may misidentify which whale produced a click. A pattern learned from one vocal clan may not apply to another. Ship noise can interfere with recordings, and a behavior that appears connected to one coda may have been caused by something the instruments did not observe. There is also an ethical question. If scientists eventually learn how to produce convincing synthetic codas, should those sounds be played to wild whales? A false signal could confuse an animal, interrupt a real exchange, or influence relationships researchers do not fully understand. Communication is not simply another source of data. It is part of the social lives of the whales themselves. Any attempt to interact with that system must therefore be tested slowly and carefully. The objective should not be to force whales into a human conversation. It should be to understand them without causing harm, and to use that knowledge to protect the world in which their communication evolved.
The first great breakthrough may not be a machine that speaks fluent whale. It may be something quieter, a system that recognizes individual voices, a model that reveals how families respond to one another, or evidence showing how human noise disrupts conversations taking place far below the surface. Artificial intelligence may never convert every click into a perfect human sentence, but it can reveal patterns that were previously hidden inside thousands of hours of ocean sound. And in doing so, it may change how we understand intelligence, culture, and communication beyond our own species. AI may not give whales a human voice. It may finally teach humans how to listen.